Predicting future criminal behavior, especially violent and serial offending, has long been a goal of criminologists, psychologists, and law enforcement agencies. While no one can say with absolute certainty who will become a violent criminal, decades of research have identified various risk factors and early warning signs that may indicate an increased likelihood of engaging in serious criminal activity later in life. But first, subscribe to our channel for more content, and don't forget to share it with your friends and family. Research has identified several key risk factors in childhood and adolescence that are associated with an increased probability of future violent criminal conduct. One of the earliest attempts to identify predictors of violent behavior was the McDonald triad, proposed by psychiatrist G.M. McDonald in 1963. The triad consists of 3 behavioral characteristics that were thought to be predictive of future violent offending, particularly serial killing. 1. Animal cruelty, harming or killing animals, especially pets. 2. Fire setting, a fascination with starting fires or committing minor acts of arson. 3. Bedwetting, persistent enuresis beyond the age when it is developmentally normal. While the McDonald triad has been influential in popular culture and criminal profiling, more recent research has questioned its predictive validity. However, some elements of the triad, particularly animal cruelty, continue to be considered potential warning signs. One of the most consistent predictors of later violent criminality is the presence of antisocial behavior and conduct problems in childhood. This includes behaviors such as physical aggression, disobedience and defiance of authority, impulsivity, lack of empathy or remorse, persistent lying. Children who exhibit these behaviors, particularly when they persist beyond the toddler years, are at heightened risk for juvenile delinquency and adult offending. For example, studies have found that children who are aggressive and disobedient at age 3 have an increased risk of antisocial behavior at age 11 and delinquency at age 15. Family-related factors play a crucial role in shaping a child's likelihood of engaging in violent criminal behavior. Risk factors include poverty and economic stress, parental criminality or substance abuse, child abuse or neglect, harsh or inconsistent discipline, lack of parental supervision. These factors can prevent children from developing the skills and resources needed to regulate their behavior and resist antisocial impulses. Many notorious serial killers, such as Jeffrey Dahmer and John Wayne Gacy, experience dysfunctional family environments during their formative years. There is evidence that certain genetic and neurobiological characteristics may predispose individuals to violent criminal behavior, though the relationship is complex and interacts with environmental factors. Some relevant findings include heritability of aggressive and antisocial traits, differences in brain structure and function, particularly in areas related to impulse control and emotional regulation, hormonal influences, such as elevated testosterone levels. A study found that the majority of notorious serial killers had experienced some form of head injury during childhood, which may have affected their neurological development and contributed to their violent tendencies. Early substance use, particularly during adolescence, is associated with an increased risk of violent criminal behavior. This relationship likely stems from multiple factors: impaired judgment and decision-making while under the influence, association with delinquent peer groups, crimes committed to obtain drugs or money for drugs. Studies have shown that individuals who begin using substances at an earlier age are more likely to engage in violent criminal activity later in life. Poor academic performance, frequent absences, and disciplinary issues at school are often seen as warning signs for future violent criminal behavior. These factors may indicate underlying cognitive or behavioral problems, lack of attachment to prosocial institutions, increased time spent unsupervised or with delinquent peers. Research has found that students with poor grades, frequent absences, or multiple disciplinary referrals are at higher risk for later involvement in the criminal justice system, including violent offenses. Several psychological traits and disorders have been linked to an increased risk of violent criminal behavior, particularly in the case of serial killers and other extreme offenders. Psychopathy is a personality disorder characterized by a lack of empathy, shallow emotions, manipulativeness, and a tendency towards antisocial behavior. While not all psychopaths become violent criminals, a significant proportion of serial killers and other violent offenders exhibit psychopathic traits. Key features of psychopathy that may contribute to violent criminal behavior include lack of remorse or guilt, callousness and lack of empathy, superficial charm and manipulativeness, impulsivity and poor behavioral controls, need for stimulation and proneness to boredom. Research has shown that psychopathic traits, particularly those related to interpersonal and affective deficits, can predict future violent offending even after controlling for other risk factors. Antisocial personality disorder (ASP) is a related but distinct condition from psychopathy. Individuals with ASP often exhibit a pervasive pattern of disregard for the rights of others, failure to conform to social norms and laws, deceitfulness and manipulation, impulsivity and aggressiveness, lack of remorse for harm caused to others. Many violent criminals, including serial killers, meet the diagnostic criteria for ASP. However, it's important to note that not all individuals with ASP engage in violent criminal behavior. Some violent criminals, particularly serial killers motivated by sexual gratification, may exhibit sadistic tendencies or other paraphilic disorders. These can include sexual sadism disorder, necrophilia, pedophilia, voyeurism. While the presence of these disorders does not necessarily lead to violent criminal behavior, they have been observed in a significant number of serial killers and other extreme offenders. In addition to the risk factors and psychological traits mentioned above, several behavioral warning signs have been associated with future violent criminal behavior, particularly in the case of serial killers. Many serial killers and violent offenders have exhibited an early fascination with violence, death, and morbid subjects. This may manifest as obsessive interest in true crime stories or violent media, collection of violent or macabre memorabilia, frequent discussions or writings about death and violence. Serial killers often seek to have complete control over another human being, and this tendency may manifest early on as voyeuristic or stalking behaviors. This can include peeping Tom activities, following or tracking potential victims, excessive and unwanted attention towards specific individuals. Violent criminals, especially serial killers, often display an escalating pattern of violence throughout their lives. This may begin with bullying or intimidation of peers, cruelty to animals, vandalism or property destruction, domestic violence or intimate partner abuse. As the individual becomes desensitized to violence, their actions may escalate in severity and frequency. Many violent criminals, including serial killers, have a history of social isolation and difficulty forming meaningful relationships. This may be evident in few or no close friendships, inability to maintain romantic relationships, preference for solitary activities, awkward or inappropriate social interactions. Violent offenders often struggle with impulse control and anger management. Warning signs may include frequent outbursts of anger, physical aggression towards others, destruction of property during angry episodes, inability to control emotions in stressful situations. Some specific examples of serial killers and their early behaviors that may have indicated future violent tendencies. Jeffrey Dahmer, known as the Milwaukee Cannibal, exhibited several concerning behaviors in his youth. Animal cruelty. As a child, Dahmer collected roadkill and dissected animals, storing their bones in acid. This fascination with animal remains foreshadowed his later crimes involving human victims. Social isolation. After his family moved to Ohio, Dahmer became increasingly withdrawn and antisocial, focusing on dissecting roadkill rather than making friends. Substance abuse. Dahmer began drinking heavily in his teenage years, often bringing alcohol to school. Ted Bundy, who confessed to 30 homicides, showed early signs of deviant behavior. Voyeurism. As a young boy, Bundy would peek into neighbors' windows, hoping to catch them undressing, fascination with knives. At just 3 years old, Bundy placed knives around his sleeping aunt's body, manipulation. From an early age, Bundy displayed a talent for charm and manipulation, traits he would later use to lure victims. Edmund Kemper, the co-ed killer, displayed alarming behaviors in childhood. Animal cruelty. At age 10, Kemper buried his family's cat alive. Later, at 13, he decapitated another family cat. Violent fantasies. Kemper admitted to having elaborate, violent fantasies from a young age. Early violence. At 15, Kemper shot and killed his grandparents. Richard Ramirez, known as the Night Stalker, had a troubled childhood that may have contributed to his later crimes. Exposure to violence. Ramirez's cousin, a Vietnam War veteran, showed him photos of women he had tortured and killed, witnessing murder. At 13, Ramirez saw his cousin murder his wife. Substance abuse. Ramirez began using drugs at a young age, which may have exacerbated his violent tendencies. John Wayne Gacy, the killer clown, showed some early signs of potential issues. Head injury. Gacy suffered blackouts after being struck on the head by a swing at age 11. Childhood abuse. Gacy endured physical and emotional abuse from his alcoholic father. Early criminal behavior. As a young adult, Gacy was convicted of sodomy, indicating early sexual deviance. While these early behaviors don't necessarily predict future violent crime, they were present in many notorious serial killers. It's important to note that many people may exhibit some of these behaviors without becoming violent offenders. The development of a serial killer is a complex process involving genetic, environmental, and personal factors. Early intervention and support for at-risk individuals is crucial in preventing the development of violent criminal behavior. While the presence of these risk factors, psychological traits, and behavioral warning signs does not guarantee that an individual will become a violent criminal or serial killer, they can serve as important indicators for early intervention. It's crucial to note that many individuals may exhibit some of these characteristics without ever engaging in violent criminal behavior. The development of a violent criminal, particularly a serial killer, is a complex process involving the interplay of genetic predispositions, environmental factors, and individual choices. Early identification of at-risk individuals and appropriate intervention may help prevent the development of violent criminal behavior. Future research in this area should focus on developing more accurate predictive models, identifying protective factors that may mitigate the risk of violent criminal behavior, and designing effective intervention strategies for at-risk individuals. By better understanding the complex pathways that lead to violent criminality, we can work towards creating a safer society while providing support and resources to those who need it most.